My name is Emel. Sometimes I go by Amy, whatever's easier for you. And my name means hope in Arabic, in case anyone wants to know. So we decided, Sajid and I decided to put together this series, obviously in response to what's going on in Gaza. There's a lot of misinformation out there, online and among people. And we started out with all the protesting, very, very active in protesting out there. But then we realized that protesting is not really educating. I mean, sometimes we get opportunities to educate within the protest. People come in and ask questions, but I decided that, and my field is education anyway, so Sajid is. So educating our community, educating anybody who wants to learn facts, learn history. And we're just here to have a very peaceful dialogue, sharing of information, sharing of ideas. Anybody who has questions is definitely welcome to ask them. And in the process of my seeking of knowledge and just looking down different methods of delivering information, I met Lea and Bob, who have become good friends. Lea is the in charge of a program called Children of Bethlehem.
Friends
of Bethlehem. I'm sorry, my brain is like everywhere today. Friends of Bethlehem. And so she has a class over by SLU at the college church, and I went and joined her class, loved it, and also met Bob in the class. And they are pros in the subject matter, probably more so than me. I'm Palestinian, but I think they know much more than I do actually in this field. So they are going to be our hosts today, and giving you the information that they want to deliver to you today.
I'm going to deny that title of pro.
I think it's very, very true. So I'll let you take it from there.
What we're hoping to do here is to have a dialogue, and neither Lea or I are academics, but we both had a lot of experience dealing with the difficulty in having a constructive dialogue about Israel and Palestine. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up a Jew in a religious home. We kept kosher. I was bar mitzvahed. I went to religious camp. You know, I learned Hebrew. Went to both religious and Zionist camp, and I loved it. And I loved the sense of solidarity with people. It was so different from the high school I went to because there were 5 Jews in my high school, you know. And in fact, the neighborhood I grew up in 1948, part of the laws that subdivision, there were no Mexicans, no blacks, and no Jews. That was changed in 1953. There was a lawsuit. But there were very few Jews in the neighborhood that I lived in. So when I went to camp, it was like, these are my people. You know, the identity that I established there was next to none, and it stayed with me most of my life, you know. Not that I don't identify with it today, but I look at it differently. You know, we'll go into that later, but
I think we're ready. Okay, assalamu alaikum, shalom, greetings everyone, good afternoon. First I want to thank the O'Fallon Public Library for, and the Middle Eastern Peace Dialogue Group for inviting us to come and share our perspectives. This topic is a tender topic, anti-Semitism. It's
can everyone hear her?
Can it? No, yeah. I have to speak louder. Yes, okay. I will do that. Okay. So that we all can share the same idea of what defines this word. We've printed the Jerusalem Declaration, and that should be available over here. And there's a brief video here that it offers a glimpse of the authors and their thoughts. So I will play it now.
So, in 2020, a group of scholars
Is that better?
from
Can
the
you hear
fields
it?
of anti-Semitism, Holocaust, Jewish studies, Israel-Palestine, Middle Eastern studies got together in order to think about anti-Semitism. We came from different backgrounds, different countries, different fields, and often different political persuasions. And we thought it behooves on us to use our scholarly expertise to try to come up with a clear, concise document that lays out what is and what isn't anti-Semitism. And this document now is in front of us, the Jerusalem Declaration of Anti-Semitism.
The Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism is really for anyone and any organization, any institution that wants to be able to recognize, understand, and respond to anti-Semitism. The document is a living document. It's informed by history, but it responds to our current situation and our current difficulties. The Jerusalem Declaration is presented as an alternative to the IHRA working definition on anti-Semitism. And for those organizations which have already adopted the IHRA definition, it offers itself as a supplement which can make good some of the shortcomings of the IHRA declaration.
This declaration had a power to really illuminate and open up places that have become very constrained and confined and frankly, almost impossible. Ultimately, I think it's going to help our students and our campuses move beyond what have become really, really harmful discussions.
I am Israeli, and I know how confusing it is for Israelis to define what anti-Semitism is, even though everybody believes that he knows what it is.
It defines anti-Semitism as a particular instance of racism. And that's very important as we form alliances and work to think better and to fight better against anti-Semitism and the other species of racism with which it coexists and upon which it feeds and which feeds off of it.
The Jerusalem Declaration creates the ground on which we can construct the broadest coalition of forces to contend with anti-Semitism, wherever it emerges, whether from the left or from the right. And it does so by reconciling the struggle against anti-Semitism with the cause of equal rights and freedom of speech.
The JDA has the potential, maybe unique among the documents that I've read, to normalize debates about politics and policies in Israel-Palestine and to encourage reflection on anti-Semitism as a form of racism.
So for me, maybe the metaphor of repair is the one that is most important. Repair brings to my mind human fallibility, but also the aim to improve, and also critical self-introspection about what we do in the world.
A good society, a good world debates things, and that's how progress is made. But I think what we can learn from this declaration is that the terms and the interpretive instruments that we elevate have clear consequences.
So he mentioned in, one of the guys mentioned in the talk, I can't remember his name, that this Jerusalem definition of anti-Semitism resulted from response to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, defined anti-Semitism, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So this was in response to that. There are three definitions we'll talk about: the Merriam-Webster, the Jerusalem, and the IHRA.
Well, Bob and I are going to present our perspectives as a Jew and as a Gentile Christian. And a lot of our study is, when we use this Jerusalem Declaration as kind of a basis for a starting point, but it's also based on our life experiences, our studies, our conversations, open conversations with other people. And so we'll share with you the results of our delving, and we're hoping that you share with us, your thoughts. So this isn't a lecture, and Nobody's going to be tested at the end. And this is a dialogue, so we hope that you all will participate and join in. And as in any conversation, the words that we use we have to have a common understanding of the meanings of the words that we use. And the mission of the Middle Eastern Peace Dialogue is, I'm going to read this here, to take a critical look at the information and disinformation about Palestine and Israel. Let's find agreement on the word peace, the peace dialogue. Is peace the absence of hostilities, or is it the presence of justice? This is what Dr. Martin Luther King says. It's peace is the presence of justice, or the result of justice. And as long as there is injustice, there's going to be resistance. And that can be nonviolent or violent. Take the word dialogue. We speak, we listen, and we understand. And participants in a dialogue don't just listen passively, they actively try to grasp and understand the perspective of their dialogue partner. So, and a deep listener is gonna, if something bothers them, he'll ask a question rather than leaping to a conclusion. He'll ask for clarification. He or she. And you know, dialogue is not a debate. It's, you know, although a dialogue alone resolves nothing. Nothing is resolved without it. Mm-hmm. So nearly everyone already has an opinion about this topic of anti-Semitism. And opinions can be rooted in past trauma, current trauma, victimhood, and continued victimhood. But they can also be based in propaganda. And in many places, the topic of anti-Semitism is taboo because it makes people uncomfortable and causes tensions. But we believe, however, that these conversations about this sensitive topic are important. They're part of developing an understanding while acknowledging our differences. Bob, you're Jewish. So what is your understanding of anti-Semitism, and have you felt personally threatened by it?
Yeah, well, I talked a little bit about my upbringing. I didn't really I don't remember ever experiencing physically threatening anti-Semitism. However, there were lots of comments that I heard, lots of pejoratives that are tossed around in our culture, you know, like gypped. I got gypped. I mean, it's a slander of gypsies who were prosecuted during the Holocaust like the Jews were. Indian giver. I mean, I grew up with these words. I used them when I was a kid. I had no idea, you know, the impact it might have on the people that they were referencing. And with regards to Jews, I mean, I heard a lot in high school. I got Jewed. Oh, you cheap Jew. Stuff like that would really just kind of stick a knife in me. And I'd always respond. Sometimes I'd respond, you know, to the school bullies, and you know, my friends would like, don't say anything. But you know, I never got beat up, and they listened to me. So those were the kinds of things that I grew up with personally. However, when I was a kid, growing up with my brothers and sisters, Exodus was required reading. Now, I'm not going to say Exodus is, you know, the truest history of what happened in Israel, Palestine, back in 1948 and before. But this is what I grew up with, and this is what I believed. It's not that in my family there was any slandering of Palestinians. There was just no discussion of Palestinians, except for in relation to the threat that they posed. That's it. No cultural, no. I mean, I could go on, but I also read Viktor Frankl, a great book, Man's Search for Meaning. Wonderful, wonderful book. These are the kinds of things that I grew up with. The Wall, about the Warsaw Ghetto. And it instilled in me an identity and a place within this identity and in this culture that I belonged. And again, with camp and everything else. So I was very sensitive to comments about anti-Semitism. I'll tell a brief story. My first visit to Israel was in 1969. I was actually in the Army. I was on R&R from Vietnam, and I took my R&R in Israel. And so I went there. I met my family in Israel, who I loved. They were all in the Palmach. I didn't know much about the history and the details of the Nakba, but to me they were heroes. I had an uncle that lived in a Palestinian home that he appropriated. When the Palestinians fled, he was proud of it. Anyway, I was there for 2 weeks, flying back to the States before I, got, redeployed to Vietnam. I sat next to an English woman who was a delightful young woman, and we were talking about where we had been, what we had done. She said, where are you coming from? And I said, I just left Israel, I have family there, and it's my first visit. She goes, oh, okay, interesting. She said, it's a shame what's happening to the Palestinians. Ended the conversation for me. Not because I didn't know anything about what had happened, really, at that point in my life, what had happened with the Palestinians. My history was terrible. But I knew that they were a threat. And I knew that this was something, expressing sympathy for Palestinians is indicated to me an attack on Jews, on Israel, on everything. That's how I grew up. So I'll pass it back to you. I could go on and on, but I'll waste your.
Yes, we love hearing your stories.
Yeah.
But Bob did mention other definitions of anti-Semitism, and here's another one. This is from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, and it reads, feeling or showing hostility toward or discrimination against Jews as a cultural, racial, or ethnic group. End quote. Okay. So let's unpack this definition.
Speak up.
How can anyone, my voice is soft, how can anyone know what another person is feeling? Because we only have outward manifestations to go by. And our interpretation of those manifestations they can be tainted by our own assumptions and biases. So in this definition, though, already we see an omission. What is it? What's the omission in that definition? Do you want me to read it again? Okay. Feeling or showing hostility toward or discrimination against Jews as a cultural, racial, or ethnic group. Anybody want to volunteer? All right.
As actions?
Also,
Actions that are missing.
Palestinians are Semites.
Oh,
Arabs are Semites.
They're all-
You know, we all come from Semi. And
We have no word.
yeah, there's no word for discrimination or violence against Palestinians. Do you know one? I mean, there's the occupation, there's, which a lot of people deny, but there is no word. Anti-Semitism refers to Jews. And I'm curious to get feedback. I want to hear your opinions, your feelings. How does that affect you? What does that mean to you? As Jews, as Americans, as Palestinians, in relation to how you were brought up and what you were taught?
Yeah, it's a word in the dictionary, and it's something that many, many, many people would see. So yes, Tom?
So I'm wondering if there's a word for discrimination against Native Americans.
That's another topic that would be very interesting to describe, but it's, I don't know.
same story,
Yeah.
same background, same
Yeah,
history.
yeah, because they're native to
Yeah,
the Americans.
absolutely, same exact
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, we gotta coin a word.
Right, so what's the word for it? I don't know. That's
I don't
what
know.
that's it.
Yeah. Well, humans do tend to categorize people according to stereotypes, and that's partly what gives rise to all the biases that we have. But they can be subtle, some of these biases, and so we really need to educate ourselves. And this is where this dialogue is so crucial. This looms large. We learn from each other. Okay. To you, Bob.
Okay.
And Maggie, where-
Speaking from personal experience, my opening my mind and trying to consider the other side and began with a nagging feeling that I don't really know what I think I know. In questioning. Ultimately, it ended up, and I thank Lee for this. Lee's been very involved in my education in terms of, she's the one that got me to go to Palestine for the first time. I was over 70. Okay, so I've been living with this. I had questions and I had doubts about what I had learned from 2006 when I went to work on an Israeli Navy base after the Hezbollah attack, the rocket attack, and I was going to do my part as a Jew and as an Israeli, although I wasn't an Israeli at that time. So that was the beginning. Yeah, that was kind of like, my big step. And I think I'm gonna get back to anti-Semitism and talk about the International Holocaust Remembrance definition of anti-Semitism. I'm gonna read something here. I'll read the definition as I quoted out of a resource out of their website. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals. I'm not sure what that means. And or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Then they list examples. They list, I think, 11 examples of anti-Semitism, the last 7 of which all have to do with the state of Israel. So this definition had an agenda. And the agenda, as I see it, and what I believe, was to conflate anti-Semitism or criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. So someone who is pro-Israel may see this definition as a tool to protect Jews. All right, you protect their homeland, you protect them. This is their refuge. The lead drafter of the IHRA definition, Kenneth Stern, accused right-wing Jews of weaponizing it. Okay, he saw what was being done with the definition, and people in the UK especially, and also in the States here in universities, were incorporating it as their definition of anti-Semitism. So he said, according to Stern's testimony, accused of weaponizing. According to Stern's testimony, these advocates have been enormously persistent in their quest to close down free speech on Israel and in the USA. The Zionist Organization of America, which has been around forever, and other groups which hunt political speech with which they disagree and threaten to bring legal cases. These legal cases instill fear of being labeled an anti-Semite, which can result in the denial of collective rights of Palestinians specifically, in addition to other people, in addition to Jews ourselves, as being labeled a self-hating Jew. I have a neat anecdote to that. But particularly Palestinian citizens of Israel as an indigenous people. It's a cancellation of many of their cultural and humanitarian projects, which are beneficial to all, because it puts the kibosh on them expressing themselves culturally, historically, because of our connection between Palestinians and anti-Semitism.
Okay. Yeah, last year I attended the Palestine Rights Cultural Festival at the University of Pennsylvania. It was in Philadelphia, and it was beautiful, fabulous. I have the booklet about it here if you want to see it. However, the head of the university was forced to resign because one of their big donors demanded her resignation because she permitted a platform for this cultural event. And I was there, and there was nothing negative about it at all. But Bob, how does Palestinian culture pose a threat to Israeli Jews? Does anybody have any ideas? Why would that culture, why would that festival, yes?
Well, I think the basism of any kind of discrimination is to make the recipient of that racism or bias inhumane. And you will, the worst we hear about another is they're like animals. They're inhumane. And so when you show the culture of the Palestinians, you see people who are highly educated, value learning, they're incredible in the arts. Any of us would kill to have one of their embroidered gowns. I mean, they're an incredibly beautiful culture. And, it's really hard to treat another with great diminishment if they're beautiful and if their real being is shown. So that's what I'm.
So you're saying essentially that it undermines their agenda.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. That's a good answer.
Any other comments? Yes.
In my international relations class, we watched a documentary on Israel and Palestine. And in the documentary, there was a line mentioned of a land without a people for a people without a land. So, showing the culture of the Palestinians, like I'm kind of piggybacking off of what she said, it shows that this land without a people has a people. So it's directly conflicting what would be best for Israel as a state.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, back in 1920, a couple of Polish Jews in the 1920s went to see what's going on, and they were Zionists. They went there on a mission to report back, and one of them came back and he went there with this idea that it's a land without a people, for a people without a land. And he came back, he said, no, it's a beautiful, beautiful bride, but she already has a bridegroom. And that's kind of a famous quote in, I don't know who I've read different things what it's attributed to, but it gets back to the point that in order to do what I hate using the word Zionist because Zionist and Zionism is not a monolithic ideology. I mean, there's a great book called A Land of Two Peoples, and it's written by, it's actually the writings of Martin Buber, and he goes back to the very beginning, and he talks about the fight between Zionists, those that wanted to live, in peace with the Palestinians who were indigenous to the land, and those who wanted it, those ultra right-wing, guys that Zionists that wanted it to ourselves. We have to have our own land. We have to protect ourselves. But in taking over the land, they had to diminish the indigenous people, much like Tom said, like the indigenous people that were living here at the time. They're, by calling them things, they're savages, they're uneducated, they have no culture, they didn't build anything. You've all heard the term, well, Jews came and made the deserts bloom. No, the deserts were blooming before. There were palms and lots of produce. But that was a strategic effort by Zionists to erase the culture that was there when they came, in order to justify what they came to do later.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Now, there are certain words or phrases that carry with them some assumptions that may not be held by your dialogue partner. And some words can trigger a healthy dialogue. It's important to share an understanding of these terms and not to take offense when no offense is intended. Some expressions mean entirely different things to different people. So let's think about a few of those terms. One of them being, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Let's think about this for a second. If you were Israeli, what would you think this meant? And, if you were Palestinian, what would you think it meant?
Can you repeat it again? From the river
From
to
the
the
river
sea?
to the sea, Palestine will be free. We hear this in some of the rallies and chants. Bob, you want to offer some ideas?
Well, it's funny, I think both sides use that term, both sides Palestinians. And I mean, in the Hamas charter, in the original charter, and also in, the modified charter in 2017, they talk about regaining sovereignty of the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. And Israel has used that term from the beginning. I mean, it refers to their biblical homeland that they're coming to reclaim. The problem, getting back to the fact that there was an indigenous population there, was that it couldn't be a democratic country from the get-go, because there were, even in 1948, there were only 30% Jews. And in the beginning, at the turn of the century, I think 6% of the population of Palestine was Jewish. And they got along fine with everybody. I mean, there were skirmishes like there are with any differences, any communities, but they got along peacefully. And in fact, the religious Jews at the time wanted nothing to do with Zionism. I never knew that until I read that book, Land of Two Peoples. But and so that turn from the river to the sea has a lot. It's just packed with meaning, and it's packed with meaning on both sides. For Palestinians, it's regaining their land. For Israel, it's reclaiming their land from biblical times. And then it's evolved over the years. Most of the Palestinians that I know in the West Bank, and I know quite a few, and I've spent a lot of time there, think of it in terms of being free and having rights and not being persecuted, having collective as well as individual rights. They live under occupation. They have no rights. Their masters can go and do anything they want at any time, and there are laws that justify it. Laws that go back to the mandate, the English mandate. Selective laws that were kept when Israel became independent because they were useful. But if you go there and you see the unbelievable discrimination, it's so plain. And that's what happened to me. I went there and it was like, boom. It didn't take long to see that I, as a human being, don't identify with this injustice. I, as a Jew, have to reconsider ideas that have been implanted in my brain, in my psyche, for decades.
That's not easy.
Pardon me?
Congratulations, because that's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah.
Please, this is a dialogue. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Do you know where does that phrase originally come from, river to the sea? Like, where does that originate?
It's originally coined by the Israelis.
Yeah.
It's originally by the Israelis.
Yeah.
So it was okay when Israelis were using it, but then when Palestinians also used it, it was not okay. But it was originally coined by them.
Well, when it was coined by them, was the definition that to be Israeli, you had to be Jewish? Was that part of it? Because I think that's the part, that's where you think, okay, well, if from river to the sea, you can only be this group, then you're discriminating. But from river to the sea, if it's like all human being free, then you're not discriminating.
So I think it was the first option that you said. I think they're not shy about it. I feel like this, they went up until now, it all has to be 100% Jewish and no one else there matters. Based on my own observations.
I think I read somewhere that was like a recent addition that Israeli citizen had more rights in Israel.
You're talking about the nation state
Nation-state
proclamation. Yeah.
So I think that's later, right? That's like
That was 2018.
Right, so
Yeah.
before that.
Trump
how
was president.
So before that, legally, everyone had the same rights? Is
No.
that-
No.
No.
If anybody wants to add to that, I'll just say that the nation-state law is non-binding. It's not a law.
But they call it a law.
But there are a lot of non-binding resolutions and declarations that kind of affect how laws are executed. And I don't want to go too much into the weeds, but I'm sorry, you had.
Well, I just wanted to say that wouldn't it be a really beautiful human experiment to take that slogan, you know, from the river to the sea, may Palestine be free, and have Palestine be anybody who resides in that area that has obtained their land in a way that is honest and not stealing from anyone else, and really, you know, treating each other truly in a way that's free, and to really create an open society where both can coexist beautifully, which in the past there were large periods of time when that occurred.
Yeah, that would be beautiful.
You know, it was my understanding that the Palestinians welcomed the Jews
That's right, they did.
following World War II
Exactly.
and said, you know, come, you know, join us here. You know, it was done with an open heart. And what if we fought for that? For both sides, rights for Jews, rights for Palestinians, equality across the board for every human being.
That would be the ideal. That would be the ideal. But when they passed this nation-state law, was there someone else?
Yes.
I was gonna say, like, she mentioned, that was the situation prior to 1948,
Yeah.
when it was Palestine and Jews existed. And I hear stories from my father about growing up as a child whose neighbors were Jewish, and they were friends and they visited one another. Jews came to Palestine, applied for citizenship, and were granted it. After 1948, that completely changed. I always kind of share this with people. I, as a Palestinian, born there, cannot get citizenship there. But anybody who's never stepped foot, if they are Jewish, can apply and be granted it. That's the change prior to 1948 and then after 1948.
Yeah, Palestine has been under military rule for,
Yeah.
well, essentially since 1948.
Yeah.
But in 2018, they passed this nation-state law. And Prime Minister Netanyahu said, the right to exercise national self-determination in the state of Israel is unique to the Jewish people, and that leaves out 20% of the population who are not Jewish.
Imagine, I mean, the population of the black minority in this country is 10 or less percent of our population. The percentage of Palestinians in Israel is 21%.
A huge minority.
Just to give you kind of, you know, a reference to use.
Are you talking within Israel or also the West Bank?
No, I'm just talking about
Within Israel, right.
Israel.
But across the whole nation, so to speak, Palestinians are not the minority.
Oh, no, it's about
I
equal.
understand that.
No.
Yeah, I mean, if you're including the whole entire area, originally known as Palestine, the Palestinians are truly the majority. But still, because even in the West Bank, they're still living under military Israeli rule.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
but you're just talking about the actual Israeli side outside of the West Bank.
Yeah,
Right.
because
Yeah.
the nation-state proclamation only referred to.
Okay, gotcha.
Although, and shall continue, although it does have an impact on the West Bank.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, and that is that it promotes, you know, one of the three, you said the first one.
Yeah,
Jews have collective and individual rights within the state of Israel. Palestinians only have individual rights. In other words, their cultural rights, their schools, their neighborhoods that they live in, they're restricted.
Well, and also, we also need to remember, in the West Bank, so this nation state that you're referring to that applies only to Israel, what about the settlers, the Israeli settlers that are living in the West Bank among the Palestinians who still have land? So do those rules apply to them as well?
That's the third thing.
Well, that's one of the three.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead,
yes.
what's the second?
Yeah, no, well, it establishes the creation and support of settlements as a national value. So it's like it's an enterprise that they're gonna promote.
They don't say
Settlements in
where.
the West Bank. They don't say in the West Bank.
He doesn't specify where in Israel. It's left vague, so it will apply to settlements. Well, I mean, really, are you gonna build a settlement within your own country? I guess maybe not, but there, you know, it's to open the door for settlements anywhere in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in Lebanon.
Golan Heights.
Yeah, in Syria.
Yeah, so, okay, well, let's go on to another expression here. We hear a lot these days about an exchange of hostages and prisoners. Now, is there something about this phrasing that is a little bit off? Does anybody have any thoughts about this?
Prisoners implies that they did something wrong, whereas hostages were taken against their will. That's the definition and the...
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, the implication is that the prisoners, well, in actuality, what happens to, what is,
Yeah, I mean, there were, you know, after, Israel's had this thing about, what do they call it? Administrative detention. They can hold an individual, and oftentimes it's children, for 6 months.
Oh, they can extend it indefinitely.
And they can extend, and they don't have to have a cause or a reason. It's called administrative detention. And something like, I think, of the 7,000 prisoners that were taken after October 7th, something like 3,000 were on administrative detention. So are they prisoners? Or are they hostages? I mean, of course you're called prisoners. And of course the Israelis that got kidnapped by Hamas are hostages. And, you know, there's subtle things, you know, like conflicts, like, I don't think it's a conflict. I mean,
I think it's important to understand as well, these Palestinians who are put in prisons, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, they were taken oftentimes from their homes, children taken, and I'm not exaggerating, this can be confirmed in documents. Yeah. Children are taken from their homes, from their beds in the middle of the night. Parents are not allowed to go with them, no lawyer, no charges, or they just go because there are no repercussions. These children are taken, put in prisons and called prisoners, but they are also indeed hostages because these children have not done anything wrong in the literal sense, but oftentimes they create something that the child did.
Yeah, they manufacture. A lot of times they have to sign confessions.
Yes.
In order to get out, you have to sign a confession, which is of course written in Hebrew, which the child does not understand. But they want to go home, so they sign it. You know, and then say, oh, all these kids are throwing stones. You know. Yes, Shakira.
What number of hostages / prisoners were taken prior to October 7th by Israel from the Palestinian communities?
prior to October 7th?
Well,
prior to October 7th.
Annually, there's between 500 and 700 children I mean, they take them as young as 7 or 8 years old. They take them out of schools. And there's videos of this, Salon, which is, I think the oldest human rights organization in Israel. It's an Israeli human rights group. But they have cameras everywhere, security cameras. And this is all recorded on the Bethlehem cameras.
Yeah. I looked that up. I was wondering that myself, and I looked it up, but I forget. It's around 5,000-6,000. It could be more.
Total?
No, previous to October 7th. October 7th, I think that's what your question
And
was.
that was total or per year?
No, that was prior to October 7th.
Okay.
There were a lot, and then after October 7th, they just started arresting everybody. I mean, they were arresting hundreds and hundreds of people.
I've heard that 40% of Palestinian men will be imprisoned at some point in their lives.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That's about right. That's about right. Yeah.
And it also puts a pale over their heads, because if they get arrested again, there's fines. I mean, and they're big. And Palestinians don't have, one of the Palestinians don't. It's difficult to make a living there. I mean, you're so restricted. Everything comes in and goes out through an Israeli port. Everything is controlled by Israel, and since October 7th, that's increased like a millionfold. I mean, they actually had I went there after October 7th, and there was just a complete lockdown. And, there were, they were all imprisoned. They closed all the roads to all the major cities, except for one, and it was sometimes it was a back road, like the city of Yatta, which is, I was in Masafer Yatta, you've probably heard that term. And it was a back road, it was a beat up, pothole, dirt and rock road. And all the cars had to go meander through that to get to this, this city. And then if anything happened, if anything went on, if there was a protest or if a Palestinian threw rocks, or if there was a settler attack, they'd close it off. They put a checkpoint there, a gate, close it off. They did the same thing with Hebron. They did the same thing with Ramallah. It took me 2 hours to get from the Jabba checkpoint into, and what's the name of the town your mother lived in, Amy?
Kufaraka.
Yeah, it took me 3 hours to get from there to Kufaraka.
It's normally what, 30 minutes?
Oh, it's not even, it's not even that far.
It's a very short trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that will make life difficult over there, and we have an enormous, a huge generation of college graduates over there. They graduate college and then they have absolutely no opportunities to use their degrees. My husband's nephew graduated with a law degree over there, and there's absolutely no opportunity for him. He came here, was lucky enough to get a visa here, and is now working as an Uber driver and barely making it. And he's a lawyer.
Well, these are huge difficulties that are thrown in their path.
Right.
And it's worse in Gaza. I mean, before October 7th. I mean, they had a lot of universities. There's a lot of well-educated professionals in Gaza. They can't leave Gaza.
They choose for you when your water comes on. I was there. I lived it. And my first time there, I opened the faucet and nothing's coming out. And I'm coming from America. We don't ever have a shortage of water here. And I'm like, oh, the faucet's broken. And they said, no, it looks like we're out of water. So that was my first experience, like, wow, out of water like that. I couldn't imagine, coming from here. And sure enough, their water supply is turned on twice a week if you're lucky. They have these huge tanks on the roof, and it collects as much water. And the day the water comes on, everybody's going crazy trying to do laundry and clean their house. It's a mad, chaotic thing all day long. It's crazy. And then the rest of the week, you're just really trying to make that water last until the next time the water's turned on. So, everything is under control.
Yeah, can you imagine living here in Illinois? Can you imagine that being imposed on your life? Yes.
I've been in communication with the Palestinian family that has been moved 4 times because of the war and are living in a tent in a refugee camp. And to be able to get out.
In Gaza?
Yes. In order to get out to go to Egypt, the cost is $6,000 per family member.
Yeah.
That's what they have to pay. And they're trying to get 12 family members out, and it's $72,000. This is not the kind of money that is readily available.
Who's charging that money? Egypt?
You know,
Egypt.
I
It's
don't
Egypt.
know if it's Egypt or if it's.
It's Egypt.
Is it Egypt?
It's definitely Egypt, yeah. And then, so a lot of them are lucky enough to have relatives here in America who are actually sending them the payment. But there's a long line of people, and I guess they have, I don't know what their guidelines are for releasing or allowing people out, but yeah. And then if you've been living in 6 months of being homeless, you certainly don't have $6,000. You don't have $6.
Well, this particular family, they showed the picture of the home they had lived in. It had been bulldozed to the ground. There was nothing left.
Yeah.
They had nothing to go back to, and they had lost all of their life savings. They had no money.
I witnessed on video online, it's very public, IDF was going through all the homes and actually taking whatever valuables they could find that belonged to the Palestinians, whether it's gold, whether it's money, whether anything, it was being confiscated.
Yeah. They do that in the West Bank too.
I was just gonna say, it's really important to kind of also recognize that the bulldozing of homes isn't just something that happens in Gaza. This has happened for as long as Israel's been in existence, that homes in the West Bank are often bulldozed under the guise of you didn't obtain the appropriate permits. But it's nearly impossible for Palestinians to get appropriate permits from Israel. And so they will bulldoze, like I said, under the guise of that, and there's no Hamas in the West Bank.
You know about Mashtubas? Mashtubas? Their cars, you know, as well as not being able to get building permits, most Palestinians, they make it very difficult and very expensive to get a registered automobile, to register an automobile. And those that do spend a lot of money to get one. Most of them, probably 95% of the cars you see, 90% in the West Bank are illegal, are mashtubas, because they can't afford it. I mean, you know, and they need a car to get to work, take the kids to school, shop, go to the doctor. So they get confiscated all the time. They get confiscated. They go to a broker. You know, the Israeli Civil Administration collects the money, the fine. They sell the car to a broker, and they sell them back to Palestinians. And it's a rotating thing. It just happens all the time.
Well, to bring us back to anti-Semitism.
Oh, go ahead.
Did you have a question? Or a
I did, but
comment? Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
No, go ahead and you finish and I'll ask
No,
later.
no, I'm gonna change the subject.
Well,
Sort of.
Okay. So Bob, you were raised in the spirit of, you went to Zionist camp and you were
Yeah.
raised. And, you know, as I continue to hear all this stuff, in nonviolent dialogue, you come at it with the assumption that everything we do comes from an attempt to meet a need. So I'm trying to understand what is the attempted need, what is attempted to be, what need is being attempted to satisfy by the decision makers in Israel who are doing these actions. I sense that there's a fear, you know, security is a key word. So what need are they attempting to meet by doing these things?
Well, does anyone besides myself want to answer? I mean, I have my own ideas, but.
Shakir.
Well, we live in a geopolitical world, and there is greed, and there is evil. And majority of citizens in Israel don't agree with what's going on, and many of them don't even know what's going on.
I agree.
Part of my family is Jewish, and they're appalled by what's going on. So, you know, there are forces to be that there are things going on we don't understand.
I mean, I know security is a basic human need, and I'm wondering if there's a perception that my security, a constant perception that my security is at risk here, so I have to overkill.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I think there are Israelis that feel that that's a real issue.
And where does that come from?
Politically, I think, it's just my own opinion, you know, you can do with it as you like. No, I think they just want all the land. They want the land, and they don't want it with the burden of Palestinians. What I'm afraid of, and what I see happening with this ultra right-wing Israeli government, which has nothing to do with Judaism, even though a lot of them wear religious garb. I do not identify with it. I want nothing to do with it. They want all the land without the Palestinians, and they're creating a situation in the West Bank which is very similar to Gaza. And they have an example of Gaza now. If you don't behave, this is what's going to happen to you. And it's scary. And it's happening today. I mean, I can show you on my phone, I get messages from, there's stuff happening every single day. 40 homes yesterday morning outside of Ramallah were burned. And these are nice homes. These were Palestinians that work and have families, and they built these beautiful homes, and they were just destroyed by settlers.
Well, I just wanted to respond to Deb's question. I mean, I agree that I think most Israelis don't have any idea, because there's a very systematic effort on the part of the government to prevent any kind of contact between Israelis and Palestinians. Where I would disagree with you a little bit, and you could chime in here, is that most Israelis completely support the occupation. I think the majority are support. We know from the statistics that are coming out from mainstream media that they support the war.
Yeah.
Whether they know that it's genocidal is another issue, but they absolutely support the war. And it's part of this defense narrative in response to your question that is ingrained in the way Israelis are educated. It's the most military, it's one of the most militarized cultures on earth. And they're inculcated with it from the moment that they're born with this vilification of Palestine. And we're seeing this now in terms of Gaza. And the representation of Gaza as collective punishment, that they're all terrorists, the genocidal language that the Israeli Defense Forces are using against them. So I think that's what's going on now is an extension of what's been happening. It's not an aberration. I think we all have to understand that it's it's part of a 76-year-long occupation and military occupation for the last 56 years.
Thanks, Angela. And we have one more hand back here, Tom.
So, I've been thinking about this for a long time, even way prior to October 7th. And that is the idea that what is the difference between the Warsaw Ghetto, the conditions there, and the conditions in Gaza, and even the West Bank? What is the difference?
There have been comparisons made, and I think the person who did make the comparison just got lambasted. There was an article. Angela, do you remember? Oh, that's right, Masha Gessen.
Yeah. What's that called?
That's right. Good article. Read it.
She got the Hannah Arendt Prize.
Yes.
And what was going on, and people were talking about the fact that if Hannah Arendt, who was of course Jewish, had gotten the prize, it would have been revoked by the German government. But she was both vilified for making that analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what you're thinking of?
Yeah. I like to make the analogy between the Warsaw Ghetto and Israel in the future. But anyway, that's science fiction.
What's that person's name who made the comparison?
Masha Gessen, how would you spell that? M-A-S-H-A? If you misspell it, it'll still come up, probably.
But there is like Israeli, there were like political parties that wanted a peaceful coexistence, right? When the Oslo Accord was being negotiated.
There were who? On what side?
The Israeli political parties that wanted peaceful coexistence with Palestine.
The Oslo Accords is a whole separate topic.
Yeah,
And
I wouldn't want to touch that.
Yeah, it was a lot of people think it was a smokescreen. So, and a lot of things have been.
I mean, what I understand is that at this point in Israel, they're being taught this ideology. So the people who believe that, we should coexist with other people in this land, that number of people is shrinking because everyone from their young age is being told this is their birthful right. And this is.
Yeah, it's a problem.
So.
Yeah. It's kind of like, we're trying to break the walls here. We're trying to open up the conversation. Do we have any Jews here besides myself? See, that's an issue.
I raised a Jewish son. I wasn't Jewish.
See, that's an issue. That's an issue. And Ryan can talk about some of the complaints that were sent in about what we're doing here today. And, we were hoping we'd get it. I was hoping we'd get attacked. And we're not. It's difficult to break down the walls just to get people here.
But I think in USA, from media, what I understand is that in USA, most Jewish, I don't know if it's considered most or not, but Jewish American citizens are sympathetic to, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out my words. Like the Jewish people there are anti-Zionist Jewish American, and I understand that there's a bigger group of them.
I don't know about anti-Zionist, but I will say there's a growth in pro-Palestinian rights amongst especially younger Jews, not the old fogies like me. We're pretty, we're petrified.
Because the younger Jews, like all younger people, aren't just following mainstream media. They have access to Instagram and other media.
Oh, they have, they're not just following mainstream media, exactly.
Exactly,
And
they're really kind of making up their own mind and reaching out into other corners, which I think is really good.
So Bob, you just said we're petrified. Can you expand on that? Because I think you just kind of affirmed what I said.
I just what?
You kind of affirmed what I was saying earlier. There's this fear, a need for.
Oh, I didn't mean petrified in terms of fear. I mean being petrified in terms of not being not being changed.
I gotcha.
No, I think most people my age, when I came back from my first extended delegation over there, I lived there in a Bedouin village for 3 months, and I came back here and I thought, oh man, I'm gonna tell the Jewish community what I saw, and they're gonna, it's like they didn't know. I mean, I was so naive. Then I came back, I called several rabbis, like 3 or 4 different temples. I talked to, the machers that, put on the religious webinars and talk all this, you know, and I don't mean to put it down, but, you know, all this spiritual, theoretical stuff. And, you know, I approached him, I said, why don't we talk about what's happening in Palestine? We can't. You know, it's, you know, our constituency. And we talked about their funding. And, oh, it's not about, you know, I hate talking this way about my people. You know, they said, it's not about funding. It's not because, you know, we get money and we won't talk about it. And then I hear this long explanation saying that, well, you know, if our constituency doesn't ask for it, and I mean, these are the leaders of the community, right? Then we won't get funded. And I was so frustrated.
Nobody wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get Elvira in the back and then Terry in the front here.
Bob, you said one word, my people, and one of my American friends, American Jews, said my people, and I said to my friend, I said, not your people, my people too. And I think that this is the essence that I know from war in Bosnia and applies to any people. And that was for me triggered when I heard that again. Like, as long as we think there's my people and your people, whichever people we hear talk about, that is the essence of the problem.
Yeah.
Whether we put it on this group or that group and however we label it, unless we start looking as a people, as humanity. And I think, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to belittle or
oh, no, I meant it that way.
This is what my friend said to me once, and I said, oh, and she was talking about Jewish people. And because Bosnia is well known for diversity, the same way we know from Palestine, how Palestinians welcomed the Jews from Europe when they were expelled from Europe, and how they welcome people and how the people live together. And then all this notion, when we create groups, there's these people and there are the other ones, there are the other ones. As long as we have that notion of thinking my people and your people, we cannot move forward.
Exactly.
And this is what happens in Bosnia, and I'm not trying to talk about Bosnian war here, but because I lived 4 years to war in Bosnia, I listened to these narratives. These people are doing this, these people are doing that. Even though in our families we have mix of everything.
Exactly.
And so for me, I mean, being through NGOs and all these work, what I've seen, as long as we have that way of thinking, we won't be able to move forward. So all that's patching. I mean, and you will hear my people, really, so that rest is not the people. And I'm not saying to you anything, but I'm just saying I've heard that.
Yeah, that's a large part of the point that we're trying to make today.
Exactly. I said it pointedly. But you're exactly right, and you're right on target.
Yeah.
Terry, thank you.
I thought somebody else would have raised it by now, but how can you be anti-Semitic against a country like Israel or the state of Israel? Do you have to I hate Israel? Does that make you then anti-Semitic? What does it mean to hate a country? How do you show hate to a country? How can a definition of anti-Semitism be against a state? And the problem in Israel right now then is serious because a large percentage of people that live in Israel and are citizens of Israel are not Jewish. So that if you hate Israel, do you also hate them too? They're citizens. If I hate America, does that mean I hate all Americans or only some of them? Can anti-Semitism be like in parcels, little pieces? I'm only 10% anti-Semitic. Okay? Or I'm only anti-Semitic on Thursdays. Because I love Israel. The rest of the time I hate them on Thursdays.
Well, if you subscribe to the boycott, divest, and sanction, there's an example of how you can hate the whole state, because people say that that's going to damage the whole country.
I think we have someone who wants to comment on it.
You could hate the institution of Israel but not the people. The government that it has become, and those institutions, but not the people. And there's a lot to be upset with there, and
Yeah, you all are anticipating some of the things we're gonna say about systems.
Yes.
To me, I'm a biologist, and I have a very strong feeling about something that's inanimate, and a state is inanimate. A rock is inanimate. Maybe they're not, and biologists don't really know, but people are animate. I can see you can be anti-Semitic to people, but how can you be even anti-Semitic to a body of legislators or something? So if you hated the legislators of Israel, then you would be anti-Semitic? What if some of them are not Semites? I think you got a problem there. You can't, one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
I've had that argument with my brother.
So, what Elvira was talking about, being in the silos and labeling, and to label someone an anti-Semite or anti-Semitic it's a shorthand, and it really shortchanges, the person listening, and it shortchanges the intended target. But labels are weaponized, and I used the example of the University of Pennsylvania earlier, and she lost her job. And you can use jobs, contracts, opportunities, friends and family as well. And it's a big stick, and the only thing it can do is exacerbate the friction. And you can be critical of Israel's policies and not be against Jews, or even the state of Israel. If you think about the prophetic tradition of the three Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all have a prophetic tradition of speaking truth to power. But you can also support Israel's policies and be totally anti-Semitic. I'm thinking of particular groups who kind of use smoke and mirrors. But we see, I kind of have a little bit of a rule of thumb that when the conversation degenerates into name calling, that tells me that the person, throwing out these names doesn't really have any solid basis to support what they're saying, their claim. So, working on the root causes of the friction is the way to go. And certain triggers will come up in conversation, and the important thing is to remain in the conversation long enough so that you can understand the context and the intent of the way it's used. So, and then then you can understand it a little better. And labeling an act as hostile requires that you project a motive on the doer of the action. And there are, of course, we know, horrible deeds of violence perpetrated against Jews and other racial groups and ethnic or cultural groups, and just because of their identity. And they're to be condemned. Those actions are to be condemned. But many times there are microaggressions that occur not because of malice, but because of cultural grooming. And Bob alluded to this earlier when he was talking about being gypped. But these are, we grew up with these things, and as kids, you just never think about it. So, to some degree, we're all products of our environment. And some of the injustices are systemic, and one person alone isn't going to be able to change it. And it requires organization to overcome and effect the change. So, Bob, you know a lot about the Israeli systems. Can you suggest any that would need changing?
I could go on Yeah, I can think of a number of them. But I think we're kind of running out of
Yeah,
time.
we are running out of time.
And I'm sorry, we've kind of, it's been good, and we've had a good discussion on we can't cover everything, but I would love,
Yes.
you know, it'd be great to be able to do this again. I mean, the one institution I would say is the occupation has to end. I think Elvira, when he was talking about my people, is absolutely right. And I've seen it from both sides. You know, I've seen it from both sides. You know, like, you can't say that. You know, you're betraying us. And I've heard that from both sides. I've been criticized from both sides because I want to talk. I'm not going to demonize all Palestinians, even though some do things that are violent. They asked me on TV during a demonstration, well, are you defending Hamas? I said, I'm not going to answer that question. I didn't endure, 17 years of living in an open air prison. I mean, I can't answer that. But I will say this, it didn't start on October 7th, if that's what you're thinking. And also, I've been criticized by Palestinians because I have Palestinian friends, Zionist friends. I said earlier, Zionism is not a monolithic ideology. I have Zionist friends that see what's going on, can't stand it, are not ready to shake the label, because of their family, because all their friends, because of their community, their temple that they belong to, because they're connected. Yeah, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but we can talk to them. We have to open up dialogue with people that we would otherwise not want to be around. And there are people there. And by demonizing everybody, we really close down the wall in the conversation. And I think that's.
So there are systems, both in Israel and in Palestine, that need to be examined for their potential to change the paradigm. And that's something that, everybody can do. And our topic today was anti-Semitism, and we're not here to tell you what is or what isn't, but we're kind of just offering you some suggestions for you to consider when you're making your own decisions or thinking about it. But in my opinion, like just what Elvira was saying, is to focus on our values rather than on our tribe, and to separate what happened in the past from what is happening right now, today, and to try to avoid justifying staying inside our bubble, and to see everybody as an individual rather than as part of a monolithic bunch of people, and to shake off groupthink, think for ourselves. So Dr. Maya Angelou said it really well. She said, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.